You can see the title of today's presentation is Adapting DC Operations to the E-Commerce Surge Without Breaking the Bank. And our presenters are Dan Keller and Matt Bilodeau. Before I turn things over to Matt and Dan, I'd like to just go over the agenda. First of all, as many of you know, e-commerce has spiked over the last few months, in large part as a response to the coronavirus pandemic. People have been staying out of stores and they've been doing much more of their shopping online. So during the presentation, we're going to talk about that spike in e-commerce, as well as how that has impacted DC operations that may have been more oriented towards store replenishment and wholesale orders. Then we're going to cover some of the strategies to improve e-com operations. And finally, Dan is going to give us two examples of Lucas customers that have improved e-com fulfillment alongside their B2B operations. And like I said, we will then be doing an online Q&A. As a reminder, again, you can type in your questions in the Q&A box and they will come directly to our presenters. So with that, let me turn it over to Dan Keller.
Great. Thanks, everybody. Hope you can hear me. Thank you, John. So obviously, it's no question, it's no revelation that e-com has been accelerating. We've seen that over the last few years. In fact, in Q4 2019, e-com accounted for around 11.4% of total retail sales, up from 10.1% in Q4 of 2018. So year after year, we've been seeing moderate gains around 10%. But obviously, the COVID situation has changed things dramatically. People who were not normally buying online have all of a sudden been driven to this and forced this due to not being able to get to the brick and mortar stores. So, I mean, just in grocery alone, I just read yesterday that online sales went from 14.5% in February of this year to currently 27.9%. Huge gains. And we've seen the same type of things in several other industries. Home improvement, beverage, and the retail business all have seen just tremendous, huge gains. Obviously, the companies that are seeing this have had to think through what types of things or what type of strategies they need to put into place to help alleviate these or to handle these. So in the grocery business, we've seen the use of things like Instacart, where there are services that will come in and actually pick orders in the grocery aisles. We've seen dark stores. Literally, Bed Bath & Beyond closed, I believe it was 60 of their stores to turn them into e-com fulfillment operations to pick from the stores and ship to customers. We've seen the advent or tremendous growth in the customer pickup areas. True Value and Do It Best hardware stores have reported e-com and pickup volumes over 200% gains in the last 3 months. We've seen even the advent of back of the store automation in terms of what they call micro fulfillment centers, small automation with small footprints back of stores to be able to handle this. Obviously, a little higher cost option. We've seen a lot of the traditional e-com providers like Amazon getting so much volume, they're pushing back some of the shipments to their suppliers. So manufacturers and companies supplying product to Amazon are now being asked to ship directly to the customers, which is, of course, a major burden for most people who are not prepared for that. So how has this affected e-com DC operations? Okay, first and foremost, direct-to-consumer is definitely a different animal. There are more orders. There are smaller orders. There are fewer lines. Many of them are one-line orders. There are different units of measure. Normally, if you ship pallets or cases, you might find yourself now having to ship eaches or inner packs. It's a harder process to plan. Normally, if we're shipping business to business, we have the opportunity to plan. You get your orders overnight, you know what's coming. You can do a waiving process to replenish your pick slots. All of that goes out the window when you're doing direct fulfillment, especially with what the public is expecting today, which is either same day or next day shipment. So there's more of what we call streaming orders that are coming in and need to be immediately addressed. A lot of challenges, in addition to which our distribution centers and our current infrastructures sometimes, or most of the times, may not be set up for this. So we have in place warehouse management software systems that are typically driven to, handle the way we ship. So WMSs that normally rely on waves all of a sudden have to start to break through the waves to be able to ship orders. You get an order in at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. You can't wait for that waiving process. You might have to ship it right away. Your infrastructures in terms of bins and racking may need to be adjusted. If you're normally shipping in pallets or cases, you typically will have pallet slots or pallet bays in your warehouse, but all of a sudden you need to be able to put in either carton flow with broken case or shelving for low velocity products. So these are different physical aspects. If you're picking to pallets or to jacks, you might all of a sudden need to put in carts or ways to be able to handle picking directly to a carton or to a tote. So the B2C environment has caused a lot of thought to be addressed in terms of change. And the other challenge that we're faced with is the fact that you're not going to stop the B2B environment. So you have to be able to handle both B2C and B2B simultaneously. And again, these are real challenges. So what are some strategies to think about how you can handle this? Okay. One of them, and we're going to talk about this in detail in the next few slides, is the option to put in place warehouse execution software systems front-ending your current either ERP or WMS. And so that way you'll be able to handle situations like handling order streaming, where orders are coming in, you need to decide which ones get processed right away. Handling single line, single quantity orders where you immediately have to pick a lot of product and then go right to a packing process. Being able to handle multi-line orders where you actually will sort to orders as you pick them or sort orders prior to the shipping or the packing process using things like put walls or sorter systems. So having these new processes in place are very challenging, but there are ways that you can handle it without changing your racking and without changing your current infrastructure. And now I'm going to turn it over to Matt, who's going to talk a little bit about the Lucas software strategies to be able to help you to handle these radical changes. Matt?
Okay, thanks, Dan. I'm going to go into now is a component of the Lucas Work Execution Solution, which is comprised of a Lucas Engage, which is a server-side or cloud-side logic, which kind of drives execution, but also Lucas Move, which encompasses the mobile, the application that's on your mobile device, that's voice-directed, multimodal, if need be, and features the voice Jennifer. The idea behind this is to, in real time, deal with the kind of situations, the dynamic sort of order pool that results from e-commerce or e-commerce type of orders where you have large numbers of small orders that need to be dealt with in real time with high service levels where, of course, the customers are unforgiving. So how do you deal with this? And the approach that we've taken with dynamic work optimization is conceptually the best way to think about it is very much a real-time optimizing and directing of work, which is giving your workers the next most efficient work to do at the right time based on your schedule and the rules that you've set up ahead of time. So conceptually, at a high level, there's three things that are going on. One is the dynamic work prioritization, in which you go in and you pre-configure the priorities, your types of orders, your routes, your carriers, the things that impact the schedule and during the day. The second piece is batch optimization, and this is to drive the most dense picking possible, which very sophisticated algorithms that use a digital model of your DC to try to drive pick density as high as possible when grouping orders, but at the same time taking into consideration prioritization, which we'll get to in the next slide. And finally, path optimization. Path optimization is we actually put a virtual model of your DC into our software, and in real time. If I'm given a cart full of 10 or 12 orders, it will in real time establish the shortest distance for me to travel through the path. And we'll get into a little more detail on that. There's also a lot of information available on the website on this. The bottom line is that typically a customer can reduce their travel distance between 30 and 70%. Travel distance has always been that thing that's been hard to kind of argue with when improving productivity, and so put in some very sophisticated algorithms. So a little deeper about how it works. On the left would be the order pool that's accumulating from the WMS and the ERP, and on the right would be associates requesting a work assignment. So what this does is it allows these orders aren't being planned ahead of time, 10 minutes, 2 hours, 4 hours. You set up your rules ahead of time that UPS is going out at 3 and USPS is going out at 5, and you put in your batching rules as well as what kinds of equipment are being used, for example, what kind of equipment, the cubing, starting and end points for the users, your schedules, which are your priorities for your order types in terms of which ones have to get out at which times during the day, and the algorithms which DWO applies. So a good example would be this. If I'm the associate and I'm picking e-commerce orders, I'm being directed. The next time I say get work, in real time, it's evaluating what are the current priority rules that are coming into play in terms of the ship dates of the orders, when they have to be delivered, route or carrier or order type they're going out on. And all I do is say get work, and it will go into the order pool and find the commonalities of product, the orders that can be put together that fit and balance with the prioritization as well. So you aim for pick density, but it also has the capability of prioritization taking over as need be. And this is all done in real time. So a good example would be if I was picking to say a 5 o'clock USPS pickup, and I'm just being directed through my work on minimal travel time, and then suddenly orders are just streaming in, sort of waveless, typically in e-commerce. And some orders come in that need to go UPS, so maybe that's leaving it at 3. So without any human intervention, I'm going to get, if those UPS orders start flowing in, I'm going to be getting those, and it's going to be creating, if it can, optimize batches where there's a lot of pick density. But this is where, if it's close to 3, it will automatically override and say it's too close to 3 o'clock. We're going to go out and pick these as quickly as possible and get them so they can get out the door to meet the service levels. So. The pick path optimization is probably the most sophisticated part of this in terms of the mathematical models that are applied. Typically in warehouse management, in its most simplistic form, of course, is location code, but most would these days tend to use a location sequence of 1 to n, which just tends to drive people in a fixed location. You get a lot of dead travel, wasted motion, and which ends up not creating just inefficiencies, but fatigue among your users as well. What DWO does after it's put together an optimized batch for me is it calculates not just the distance. The distance is obviously the most key part, but it also weighs cost It's not just strictly, it's sophisticated enough to not just say, okay, well, if I go down this, it's going down in this particular path and I have to change direction, there's a cost to that. And it applies that as well. It's not pure distance. It also takes into the unique constraints of your DC, whether there's cut throughs, whether there's narrow aisles, whether there's only a single direction. And it takes this all into account. And it's able to produce a result for your picker in just a few seconds, which is pretty remarkable. And then if your experienced pickers your good pickers are going to save you money by maybe changing the path or avoiding some congestion, like skip aisle. You will dynamically re-optimize that pick path into potentially a new one. So as an example, we'll go to the next slide. This is a simulation. We have the ability to simulate optimized versus traditional approaches in WMS for travel distance. And what this is going to do, it's going to go fairly quickly, but if you look at the blue box on the right side is going to show the location sequence for a standard location sequence order, and then the order picked with the path optimization by Lucas DWO. And you can see the savings is over 30% less travel distance. And there's a lot more on this simulation and examples on our website that I would point you to. Thank you.
Okay, this is Dan again. Some of you might have seen, by the way, if you've come to our booths at some of the trade shows, we've actually created the DWO challenge, which uses the map. It's kind of fun to play. So a couple of examples of some of our accounts who have utilized and seen huge benefits from the dynamic work optimization component of the solution. The first one is a consumer goods company, happens to be in the eye care business, shipping many small items like contact lenses and the like. And they're in Europe, they're in the UK, and they serve all of the continent. Before we walked in, they were doing paper pick, creating some batching concepts, but limited from their WMS, and seeing some potential errors that they needed to fix. By looking at their SKU counts and optimizing it using dynamic work optimization, we were able to create very efficient batches in a continuous manner. In fact, the system has features which allows it to reprioritize orders that are in their system based on cutoff times. And that's an automatic process. Literally, the system says, oh, it's 4 o'clock. Any order that came in today that has to be shipped will up in its prioritization. So they're utilizing that. The user is picking to a cart, a large cart in some cases. Actually, they have multiple size carts. And when they get work, they're getting very efficient batches with very efficient pick paths. The net results that they saw were over 100% productivity gains. Huge by any standard. I don't even think we expected that when we did the ROI. So they have seen tremendous benefits by using this and continue to expand on its use. The next solution is a US-based hard goods distributor. They sell product that is used both by do-it-yourselfers in home improvement as well as professionals. They are shipping product and traditionally have been shipping to the big boxes. So Home Depot, Lowe's, Menards are their biggest customers. They also are shipping to the hardware stores, and they actually ship to the professional markets through the companies like Granger's. They've had very little direct-to-consumer business in the past, but all of a sudden this year, that has blossomed into a much bigger part of their business. So we recently installed the system for them. They have a complex process in terms of many different styles of picking, from large non-conveyable products down to nuts and bolts. And the net results were that we were able to consolidate these many styles of picking through one execution piece. We eliminated their need to handle lots of paper and sort and print. We moved all of the printing process right to the point of work execution. So the user, when he says get work, will immediately get a set of tote labels or carton labels from a printer right there on the warehouse floor. So it eliminated people and tasks that they were doing in terms of shuffling paper. It significantly reduced his staff, specifically in their pick-to-card area where DWO is most effective. And very, very importantly for them, it made it very easy to use the process so that their people they have turnover like everybody else were able to be trained very easily and were happier doing what they were doing. So there was a great feeling for their users of, gee, this has made our lives a lot easier. So that was a very big win, and we like to tell the story. So let's summarize. What we've talked about is, of course, that we are all seeing great increases in our need to handle B2C and the problems that we have from trying to adapt our facilities and systems to help us to do that. And with the Lucas approach that we've discussed, that can be accomplished by bolting on the dynamic work optimization execution piece to your WMS or your ERP, handling your current DC layout, handling your current infrastructure, and enabling you to then satisfy that part of the market while continuing to have your B2B workflows in place with the opportunity to get the most productivity in this environment. And again, a lot of extra visibility and frankly, keep your labor force happy, not forcing them to do lots of different things. And we would love to help you with this also. All right.
Thanks a lot.
We have time for questions, right?
Yeah, thanks a lot, Dan. So we did have a couple of questions come in during the presentation. And just a reminder to everyone, if you do have a question, please type it in on the Q&A box. Dan and Matt, the first question was had to do with if I still need to pick by wave for wholesale orders as well as continuously drop e-commerce orders. How does the Lucas system handle that?
Okay, so I can handle that. There's a concept, and in fact, the last subject that I discussed, customer has that same problem. So one of the features in the system is the ability to set rules, which are, again, to set priorities that go beyond the wave. So even though you're dropping waves, you have the ability to decide, can I pick beyond that wave to increase my pick density? Now, a lot of that will have to do with the types of bins that you're picking from. For instance, if you're picking from forward pick locations that have some limitations in terms of how much you stock, you have to be considering, and again, it depends on how your waving is working, whether the waving is specifically working from a replenishment point of view. I've seen some systems that say, well, that wave drop, won't allow me to pick it until I've confirmed that I've replenished that slot. So there are things built into the system, though, that allow you to go beyond the wave. We've done, for instance, in one fulfillment operation, we went not only beyond the wave, but beyond the zone where their WMS was constrained by zone. So there are ways to handle that while continuing to have your waves for your traditional picks.
Great, thanks, Dan. And here's another question. You may have mentioned this, Matt, but what kind of travel savings can customers see using the DWO tool? What are the average travel savings? And how can, I guess there's a part B to that question, how can any particular warehouse get an idea for how much travel they can save in their particular operation?
Sure. The typical savings tends to be between 30 and 70%. You could say that's kind of a wide range. So what we have the ability to do is to take historical, a week's worth or more of order data from customers that are really interested in seeing what this can do for them. actually apply it to the same identical algorithms that are used in the real-time DWO to see what to quantify in much more accurate fashion how much the savings will be, because it so much depends on the unique layout of the DC.
Let me add to that, Matt. We just did a simulation for one of the largest food distributors in the world, and just focused on travel time. Now, they picked product in cases to pallets using jacks, and this particular one uses a triple jack, so they're picking 3 pallets at a time. By using our dynamic work optimization to decide which pallets to place onto the jack, literally that's all we were doing, our simulations indicated that we could get almost a little more than a 15% savings in travel time. And that when you apply that across, roughly 1,000 pickers in an operation, you come up with millions and millions of dollars in savings every year.
Thanks very much. So one other question came in, has to do with product. Let's see, if a product is in multiple locations, does the dynamic work optimization tool select the location for the product to optimize the batch? Does that make sense?
Yeah. Normally the WMS is deciding where the product should be picked from, because ultimately it's responsible for maintaining the inventory levels. If you have a product in multiple locations and you want to drive picks for particular types of orders or groups of orders from one or the other, there is a capability in the execution piece that Lucas provides to decide between location 1 and location 2 with rules. But that's something that would have to be addressed on a case-by-case basis.
Great. Matt, when you were talking about the pick path optimization, the question is, what if a worker wants to skip an aisle or location is out of stock? So how does the DWO, the pick path, address that?
It would recalculate whenever there's an exception to the optimal travel path that's been calculated. It will recalculate and direct the user to the next pick location. Generally, this kind of e-commerce picking people are going to continue picking. They're not going to stop to necessarily resolve it, but rather have an exception process where involves maybe an emergency replenishment to that. But what we want to do generally is to regenerate the pick path so the pickers just keep going and get that maximum value out of it.
Great. Well, it doesn't appear that there are any more questions, unless there's any questions. Obviously, people can follow up. You can email me. My email is on the screen, or reach out to us by phone. Our phones are always answered all day, all night. And like I said, we will also be sending a copy of today's presentation as well as a replay if anyone cares to share it with their colleagues. And we will be scheduling additional webinars in the near future. Thank you again for attending, and watch for an email follow-up later today. Thanks very much, everyone.
Thank you.